My name is Bill. I am an alcoholic, and could you clear the screen? Thank you. I like to see everybody. My name's Bill, alcoholic with a sobriety date of March 18th, 1981. And I really welcome the folks that are here for a few days or coming back after a few days or whatnot. I want to welcome everybody. And this is going to be a little unusual. I'm not going to be given a standard of what I used to be like, what happened, what I'm like now, because I've been asked to speak about the four choices. 2 or 3 people saw the flyer for this meeting and said, "You mean the 4 absolutes?" No, we're not going to talk about the 4 absolutes. We'll talk about the 4 choices. They said, "Well, what are the 4 choices?" Well, one of the things that happens in recovery, and if you're fairly new, and as I was when I was fairly new, and I look back now and realize I was fairly new for about 5 years, and I still have days where I'm fairly new. But when I was new, I was mainly focusing on not taking a drink one day at a time. Not taking a drink one day at a time was really important. And so most of what I'm going to talk about today goes beyond not taking a drink, but I first want to reassure everybody. My first prayer this morning was, "God, help me not take a drink today." And that was my first choice. We're going to talk about choices today. You see, I've been making choices my whole life. I was making choices before I ever took my first drink. I made a choice to take my first drink. I made lots of choices after I started drinking. And I've been making choices since I decided to come to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. The paragraph that Carol read on page 25 has this sentence: deep and effective spiritual experiences. So what I'm really going to talk about today is the so-called spiritual experience, or as Step 12 calls it, the spiritual awakening, which includes not drinking. I wouldn't have a spiritual awakening today if I was still drinking. I wouldn't have a spiritual life. I wouldn't have a spiritual awakening. I would not have a deep, this is speaking for myself. I would not have a deep and effective spiritual experience, as it says on page 25 in the big book, all 4 editions, if it weren't for the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And because of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and the choices that I have made in each of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I have a revolutionized attitude. Think about the word revolution. Turning around. Don't do a 360. You'll be back where you started. We want to do a 180. We want to turn around and go the other way. Complete revolution doesn't mean running in circles. But a revolutionized attitude. The word was attitude. And what we have, what we experience, at least this is my experience, we have a changed attitude because of our different choices. Now that page 25 also includes an asterisk at the bottom of the page, which suggests we go to Appendix 2. I'm going to do that real quick. And by the way, sit back, relax, and if you have a big book handy, you may as well find it now. Or if you don't, just jot down page numbers. You can look at them later, because I am going to be in the big book today. That's, I used to say I'm in the big book because that's where the answers are. I'm in the big book today because that's where the questions are. I need to quit wasting my time on the wrong questions. Big book tells me what question to answer before it tells me what the answer is. But that Appendix 2, which is on pages 567 and 568 in the 4th edition, says this: he can only be defeated by an attitude. See there? Attitude. My attitude, how I think about things, how I see things, how I feel about things, That's what drives how I do things. My attitude drives my choices, but there's a closed loop. My attitude is driven by my choices as well. Watch how this unfolds. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. Not just denial, belligerent denial. All in favor of belligerent denial, raise your hand. Come on, there was a time. Come on, Chanel, you're with me, baby. There was a time when belligerent, right? Belligerent denial was a lifestyle. I didn't even know what they were talking about. I was against it. If you were for it and if it wasn't my idea, even if I liked the idea, I was against it because you thought of it. Now, I'm exaggerating a little bit for effect, but sound familiar? That's attitude. You ever hear somebody go down a walk and walk past somebody and say, boy, that's some attitude? Or you're at the ballpark and you see somebody raving, you say, man, that dude copped an attitude. You look at page 55. I know we're not even talking about the four choices yet. Maya's sitting there. What's all this attitude? I thought we were going to talk about the four choices. Well, we will. Kathy, won't we? We'll get there. Won't we? Look at page 55 just for a minute. If you wish, page 55, lower half of the page, if you wish, that's a choice. You may not want to, but you can decide to, if you wish. And this could be for a newcomer. This could be for somebody around 30 years, if you wish, because this is all today. All these choices are made right now. Ones I made yesterday counted yesterday. The ones I make tomorrow count tomorrow. But let's talk about the ones we're making today. If you wish, you can join us on the broad highway with this attitude. What attitude? Join people that are having a spiritual life. He says, join us. He's already said they found a great reality. They're having a spiritual life. They're having a spiritual awakening. They're having a spiritual experience. You get to step 5. I know I'm bouncing around, but this is a fingers do the walking exercise. You can handle it. If you didn't have the book, just write down page 72, the beginning of step 5. Look at how step 5 begins. After we've made that step 3 prayer, relieve me of the bondage of self. After we've done that inventory about our resentments and fears and sexual conduct to see what's blocking us from the help we need from God. After all that, page 72 starts this way. We have been trying to get a new attitude. Oh, have I? That's the beginning of step 5, getting a new attitude. And then look at the promises we all love on page 84. Then I'm going to move on from attitude to the four choices. There's just a few, by the way. You can Google attitude in the big book and find all kinds of references. But in the promises on page 84, look at this. Self-seeking will slip away. Page 62 said that alcohol was, or the self-centeredness was my problem. Self-will run riot was my problem. We get to page 84, self-seeking is slipping away, and our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. This is not just a promise of what has happened after the first 9 steps, because page 84 follows the first 9 steps. It's a promise going into continuing this way of life in step 10, 11, and 12. Well, how do we get this new attitude? The 4 choices we talk about in the Threads of Recovery workshop we do every Monday. I guess it's 7 p.m. in the UK. It's noon in the central time zone of the U.S., and the others can figure it out. The 4 choices we're talking about are humility, gratitude, forgiveness, and responsibility. Now, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I did not see any of those words as choices. I thought they were sort of consequences, or maybe the AA Tinkerbell fairy came and sprinkled pixie dust on us, and somehow I became humble, and somehow I was filled with gratitude, and somehow forgiveness might happen, and I didn't even know really what responsibility was, except don't get caught. My responsibility when I got here was don't get caught. And I've come to find out in the last few years particularly, but when I look back, I realize this has been going on since at least the day I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, which is actually 3 months before I quit drinking. I was in AA for 3 months before I took the last drink. Humility is a choice in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Humility is a choice in the 12 steps and 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. In fact, humility is a choice in the 12-step recovery program, wherever you read about it, in Alcoholics Anonymous and any other healthy 12-step community. Humility is a choice. What do we mean by humility? It begins with, I need help. Humility is not humiliation. I thought they were synonyms when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. When I heard you talk about humility, I thought you were talking about being humiliated, being shamed, being ashamed of something I did, or feeling shame because of something somebody else did that put me in the penalty box. It took months for listening to other people share to realize humility is a good thing. Humility is a character strength. Humility's got nothing to do with humiliation. Humility begins with, I need help. It's also about emotional balance. I'm modest. I'm not too proud. I'm not too ashamed of myself. I'm kind of in the middle. I'm okay with who I am, where I am today, knowing I'm not perfect, knowing I have shortcomings. I love that there's two real neat little definitions I want to give you of humility, the choice, in the 12 and 12. Alcoholics Anonymous, 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. And they're on pages 72 and page 76. I'm going to paraphrase, but they basically say a desire to move out from myself toward God and toward others. To move out from myself toward others and toward God. And it's a desire. A desire can be a choice if I acknowledge it and nurture it. I am here to tell you today, or this evening, or wherever you may be around the world, I have a desire today, and I've had this desire for a long, long time, to move out from myself toward God and others. Do I do it perfectly? No. Do I live that way all day long? No. Do I do my inventory review at night and see how well I did step 10? And yes, I find I was selfish here. I was almost dishonest there. I started to cop a resentment over here, and I had a little fear here. I haven't had a perfect day yet. But I have a desire to put God in charge. I have a desire to be of service to others. That's our primary purpose on page 77 in a big book. I have a desire to be loving and tolerant toward others, which may sound like forgiveness, but the desire begins in humility. So when we talk about humility in any of the 12 steps and in all of the 12 steps, it always humility, the humility component of recovery, the choice to be humble. People say, well, if you talk about humility, you don't have it. I don't know what book they're reading. That's not Alcoholics Anonymous. The 12 and 12 defines it. A simple desire to move out from ourselves toward others and toward God. So I can tell you, I have humility. I know I need help. I'm not proud of my humility. I'm grateful for my humility. And I'm not here to brag about it. I'm here to report on it. Don't be afraid of being humble. That's just another form of ego. So the humility choice is a real one. We're going to see examples of that as we share today. The gratitude choice is the second one we talk about in this series. We got a couple more weeks in this series. We're going to do one Monday and one next week, and they're also on the Threads of Recovery recordings if you want to tune in. What's the gratitude choice? I'm thankful. Keep it simple. I'm thankful. What am I thankful for? Well, I'm thankful God gives me awareness. I know pretty much how I feel today, whether I like it or not, whether I like the circumstances or not, whether I like what people are doing around me or not, whether I like the way people are treating me or not. I'm aware. I quit stuffing this stuff a long time ago. I got over being afraid of being disappointed. I got over being afraid of being sad. I got over being afraid of being ashamed or put down or ignored or somehow abused by somebody else. Doesn't mean I like it. But I quit pretending it wasn't happening. My gratitude begins with awareness. And by the way, gratitude does not depend on everything going my way. A huge part of my gratitude is that God is helping me deal with how I feel, what my circumstances are, I can be grateful for God's presence in the middle of uncomfortable and undesirable circumstances. In fact, I'm more grateful for God's presence in any circumstance I'm in today than anything else in my life. It's a choice, though. It's a choice. My gratitude is not dependent on my circumstances. I choose to be grateful for God's help, whatever my circumstances. It took me years in Alcoholics Anonymous to be willing to try to do that, and I've been trying to do that for a while, and I'm here to tell you it works. It really does. I'm thankful God gives me awareness. I'm thankful God gives me acceptance. We started this meeting with the set-aside prayer. That's a version of acceptance. Accept me as I am today, accept that I don't know everything, and keep me open to learn more. That's my short version of the set-aside prayer, Maya. I'm grateful that God gives me the ability to act after awareness and acceptance. God's given me the ability to pause. Try not to act in anger, in fear, in agitation, in doubt. Try to pause. Be aware. God help me. God save me from being angry, it says on page 67 in the resentment inventory. Accept the situation, accept the people around me, accept the circumstance, and then, only after God help me, God help me, God help me, act. If I need, maybe my action is to do nothing. Doing nothing is an action. Saying nothing is an action, because it takes work to resist my temptation to get in there and fix it. And I fix it by fixing them, don't you? I mean, let's quit using it. We're after them, baby. If she'd stop doing this, I'd be fine. Oh my God, is it about me? Pause. I'm grateful. I am so grateful. God has taught me to live in the 3 A's of awareness, acceptance, and then action. Another choice is forgiveness, and some of you throw your hand. Oh, come on, dude. I'm not going to forgive her until she forgives me. I cannot forgive her. Has anyone ever said that? I'll make my amends. I'll forgive most of them, but I am never. That boss did me dirty. And then he says, that boss did me dirty for 19 years. And I asked myself, why the hell did you stay there for 19 years? But that's a whole nother story. Sorry, Andrea. Have you ever said, I can't? It's not, I can't. Are you sitting down? Because this will knock you off your pins. It's never, I can't. It's a choice. I hear myself say I can't. I feel like I can, but the choice is I won't. And someone challenges me when I say I can't forgive her, and he says, well, no, you can't, but with God's help, you can. Oh, don't bring that God thing in again. Come on, I'm having too much fun holding on to my illusion of control by holding on to my resentment and not forgiving. The choice to forgive is the choice to let go of the resentment. It's not the choice to let them off the hook. It has nothing to do with them. We may or may not tell them we've forgiven them. The forgiveness is in our heart. I choose to forgive the day for one simple reason. I decide to ask God to help me stop hurting myself. Because when I fail to forgive, I'm blocking myself from God's help. Because when I fail to forgive, I'm carrying a resentment. Forgiveness choice, I ask God to help me stop hurting myself and in the process, stop hurting others. I decide to set aside resentments. That's a choice. Feeling anger in the present is an emotion. Resenting it later is a choice to remember and nurse it. Bake that anger in the oven till it becomes a great, big, juicy cauldron of resentment. That's a choice to keep turning on the damn oven. Oh, it took me a long time to see that my resentments were choices. It took me even longer to see that my forgiveness is a choice. Particularly with some of the harmful things people have done. I'm talking serious, harmful, deceitful, illegal, immoral, unethical things that have been done to me. Now, I've done my share of all that to other people. And I've taken responsibility, and I've done lots of inventories, and I've made my amends. But there's still been a couple of those really, really, really hard to forgive. And it's God help me, God help me, God help me. Here's the point. I keep making the choice to ask God to help me forgive as long as it takes. There's a little line at the bottom of page 76, going from the 8th step to the 9th step, talking about becoming willing to make amends to them all, the people we have harmed. Neat little sentence. It says, if we're not willing, we keep asking for the willingness until it comes. Until it comes kind of sucks. I want it. I want it right now. And if it doesn't come right now, forget about it. I'm going to look for a new program. I'm going to look for a different God. Because this one isn't paying attention. Now, you may not be wired that way, but I am. I am a little impatient. We ask until it comes. How long is it going to take, Carl? Till it comes, Bobby. I'm not saying this stuff is easy, but if I want that new attitude, if I want that spiritual awakening, if I want to not drink and learn to live comfortably, if I want to not take one drink one day at a time and learn to live with some peace in a world around me that sometimes seems to be going mad, if I want to live without taking that first drink, and as somebody said a long time ago, wear the world like a loose garment, quit taking everything and everybody so damn personally. Rule 62, quit taking ourselves so damn personally. I need to learn to choose to ask God to help me forgive. I decide to set aside resentments, fears, blame, and revenge. Those are all ingredients of living an unforgiving life. And the fourth choice is a responsibility choice. Now, you might say everything we've talked about up to now are responsibility choices. I have a responsibility to become humble, to admit I need help. That begins in step one. Step one's a humility step. It's not a punishment. It's not an embarrassment. It's just, I'm powerless over alcohol. My life is unmanageable. I need help. That's a responsibility. to seek the desire to move out from myself toward God and others. I'm responsible for making that humility choice. I'm responsible for making the gratitude choice. She's not behaving the way I want her to. The granddaughter called us today with a really curveball. Man, I didn't see that coming. God, help me be grateful for your help in the uncertainty. Right, my sister? God, help me be grateful for your help in this terrifying uncertainty. I do not like the situation. It scares me. God, thank you for being here to help me be grateful for your help. That's not only a choice, that's a big step because it puts me in trust with God in the face of terrifying uncertainty. I have a responsibility to make the forgiveness choice because I am responsible for my resentments. I'm responsible for holding on to the harmful things they did to me, whether it was yesterday or when I was 5. I had a guy say in a meeting the other day about his childhood, he said, I can tell you one thing for sure about my childhood. It's over. I thought that was brilliant. I said, oh, yeah, I can say that too, but boy, it just happened. It doesn't mean what happened in my childhood didn't happen. It's over. Let God have it. God's already got it. I'm the one holding it. Oh, poor me. Oh, I should have said this. Oh, I should have decided that. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. Why did Janet break up with me in 2nd grade? I know. Some of you from Threads have heard poor old Janet. Kathy, I'm almost over it. Forgive, move on. Here's the thing. Those are all responsibilities, but responsibility goes further than that. In fact, it's my experience, and we really talked about in this workshop series the last couple months, when I make the choice of humility in my daily affairs, when I ask God to help me be grateful, I may be grateful for the circumstances. I can always be grateful for God's help in the circumstances, even when the circumstances suck. God, help me forgive. God, help me become one to get your strength to forgive. When I make those choices, those are not only responsibility choices of their own, I'm also asking God to help me respond in a new way. That's that revolutionary life we talked about. Look at the key word in responsibility. It's based on respond. Most of my life is not about what's happening. Most of my life is how I respond to what's happening around me. Most of the consequences of my life are the results of choices I make in response to the consequences of the choices other people are making. I'm responsible to let God help me get centered in all these relationships and help me respond to the situations. Now watch, this is tricky, one day at a time, people. Oh, we love to talk about, it's one day at a time, Barbara. Barbara, it's just one day at a time. We become so, Winnie, we become so flippant about one day at a time. Look at what we're talking about. God, help me be humble today. God, help me be grateful today. God, help me forgive today. I decide to ask God to help me respond to situations in a healthy, trustworthy manner. When my response looks trustworthy to other people, and my response feels trustworthy to me. Everything I'm talking about is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is where I learned it. Now, it turned out I've learned it other places as well. But I'm an alcoholic. The big book is written in alcoholic by alcoholics for alcoholics. They speak my language, as we used to say. Being responsible, not perfect. Don't get me wrong. I'm not running for sainthood here. I'm just saying I'm better. I'm less of a jerk. I'm less selfish. I'm less dishonest. I'm less resentful. And I'm a hell of a lot less afraid than I used to be. And if you're 3 days sober, and if you're 100 days sober, and if somebody's on here was counting days in the thousands, you're better than me. I quit counting at 90. I started doing months and then years. I'm good to do years anymore. Good for you for 4-digit days. But anyway, these choices are available to every one of us. I am answerable today for my choices. And I'm a pretty smart guy. I'm a pretty clever guy. I can be a very elusive guy. I can be clever and sneaky and sly. I used to go to great lengths to not answer for my choices. Not only not get caught, be sure somebody else did. Don't get caught and be sure the blame fell elsewhere. I would get caught as a kid with, in those days it wasn't Oreos, Kathy, it was chocolate chip. I would get caught with the crumbs of the chocolate chip cookie stuck to my milky lips. And my mother would say, "Who ate the cookies?" And I would do this at my brother. Pay no attention to my lips. I went to great lengths to avoid responsibility. Today I take now that may sound like a silly example, but I did that with everything. And I look back over my experience with these 12 steps, and I look back over this workshop series we've been doing since 1st of July, and I realize the following. I experienced God's care initially in my choices of humility, gratitude, forgiveness, and responsibility in those first 3 steps. I admitted I was powerless over alcohol. My life had become unmanageable. I didn't like that at first, but within a few weeks, hi, my name is Bill. I'm an alcoholic at my home group in Kansas City on Monday night. I began to understand the value of being humble, because whenever I say that I'm Bill, I'm an alcoholic, I'm acknowledging I need help. And needing help's not a character defect. Needing help's called human. That's a healthy humility. I became grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous for giving me the kind of help I needed, not knowing what kind of help I needed. Look back and realize we were getting the help we needed before we knew what kind of help we needed. Thank God AA knows the help we need before we do. That's a source of gratitude. I also became grateful for the fact that, God led me through my own suffering to AA, and then AA led me back to God. I hear a lot of people say that, and that's true in my case. God, through my suffering, through my desolation, through my desperation, finally got me to go to AA, last house on the block with a light on. And lo and behold, AA leads me back to a God of my understanding that I love dearly, and I'm grateful for today, who has taught me how to forgive. When I asked God in step 2, relieve me, when I asked God in step 2, admit there's a power greater than me that could restore me. There's a source of gratitude. There's a source of forgiveness because I'm an old man. Everything I did, I'm responsible for, but there is an explanation for it. Doesn't excuse it, but I can accept forgiveness because there's an explanation for it. I took responsibility in step 3. God, relieve me of the bondage of self, page 63, the step 3 prayer. God, relieve me of the bondage of self is my responsibility to ask. Not just ask my sponsor, not just ask my home group for prayer, to ask God. Ask God is the most often repeated suggestion in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm responsible for taking that seriously. And when we make these 4 choices of, humility, gratitude, forgiveness, and responsibility on a day-to-day basis. The promise of page 164 comes true. The promise says God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. You know what constantly means? By the way, are you constantly breathing? Are you breathing right now? A couple of you look puzzled. If you heard the question, you're breathing. Trust me. Thank you. Is your heart beating? Is your blood pumping? That's what constantly means. Good news is going on, whether I know it or not. It's a good thing I breathe and my heart beats without me having to think about it. I'd have been dead a long time ago. Constantly, God will disclose more to you, and God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. These 4 choices enable that to keep happening in my life. They're not always linear. It's not like, even though we've talked about this in a workshop and we kind of put things in boxes, it's threads of recovery. We like to connect the dots and make threads. And they're real. They're a little contrived, a little artful, but they're real. But the combination in a life, and those of us that have been on here in recovery over 10 years, over 20 years, over 30 years, I know some of us have been here over 40 years, and we're starting to get it, aren't we? We've made a damn good beginning. We're starting to get it. These are not as linear as I'm making them sound. Humility and gratitude and forgiveness and responsibility all kind of blend together. They're not necessarily linear. They're not always predictable. They're often only visible in hindsight. However, I have found that by working the steps as they're written in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, not in any other document, working the steps as they're written in the original, wow, have we got a spiritual discovery writing of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, help me seek God's help in a way that is unlike anything other I've ever found. And I am led step by step, 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 to implement the step 3 prayer. Step 3 prayer, relieve me of the bondage of self. How do we implement that prayer? Do 4, find out what resentments, fears, and sexual conduct, selfish, inconsiderate behavior are blocking me from God, so I can talk about it with one other human being in step 5 and get that new attitude. What's the new attitude I get in step 5? Trust. I learned to trust one other human being. That's a choice of responsibility. It's a choice of humility. I need the help of another person to listen and understand. I sure come out of my 5th step grateful. If you don't believe you're grateful, read the promises on page 75 that follow step 5. They begin with, we are delighted. That's how the promises coming off of step 5 on page 75 begin. We are delighted. After we've shared all this darkness about ourselves, we are delighted. That's a gratitude. We learn forgiveness in 6, 7, 8, and 9 because to become willing to make amends to them, I have had to do some forgiveness along the way. And then we keep repeating, what did we learn? How did we learn to get relief from the bondage of self? We did 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. With the help of a qualified sponsor, answered the questions, did the work, the directions of the Big Book as best we could. We get to those promises on page 84. We already looked at the complete change of attitude in those promises. What's the change of attitude? I need God's help. I drug my feet on wanting God's help in the beginning. Now I eagerly run into step 10 where it says, we have entered the world of the Spirit. Page 84, going into step 10 after the promises on page 84. We have entered the world of the Spirit. How do we stay there? We continue. Newsflash, we continue. It doesn't say we graduate. It doesn't come back. It doesn't say come back 3 days a year for a refresher. This isn't like massage therapy where you go back to class 5 days once a year to renew your license, baby. Continue today. If you don't believe me, see if it doesn't say that in your book on page 84. Maybe it's just my book. Maybe, well, I'm teasing, Paula, but continue to watch for, turn on the radar, weed the garden. You're a good person. You have a lot of assets. You're a human being. You were born with a lot of assets. A lot of beautiful flowers and shrubs and bushes. And look at this, flowering ties. I was out there working in my garden earlier today. You know what I had to do in the midst of all my beautiful, Denise has seen pictures of my garden. You know what else my garden had today? You know what my garden had in? Weeds. I just weeded Tuesday. It's only Saturday. To come back. I got to continue to weed the garden. That's all step 10 is. In the midst of all my assets, continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Is that a humility choice? Yes, it is, because I need help with those things, because I will tell myself I don't have those things. Is it a gratitude choice? Yes, it is, because the next part of the step is when these crop up. He uses the word crop up. It's kind of a dead giveaway. We're talking about, our weeds, metaphorically. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. Aren't we grateful that God is there to help me not act on them? Forgiveness, make amends quickly if we've harmed someone. That includes forgiving myself, receiving God's forgiveness, and forgiving them because they probably started it in the first place. That's my attitude. And responsibility. Resolutely turn my thoughts to someone we can help. Does it help them? Maybe. Always helps me to take my mind off me and put it on somebody else. You can see humility, gratitude, forgiveness, and responsibility in that one paragraph on page 84. Look at step 11. I'm going to close here in, you give me 2 more minutes, Maya? 2 minutes? Look at step 11. At night, we review our day. We just review how well we did step 10, not to beat up on ourselves. Take credit for the good stuff we did. Acknowledge the good stuff we did. Be grateful to God for helping us be better than we used to be. And take responsibility for looking at the parts of me today that could have improved. Then you wake up. Middle of page 86. On awakening. There's a dead giveaway as to when to do that morning meditation. On awakening. For me, it means during the first cup of coffee. Ask God to guide my thinking and inspire me and keep me away from selfish motives. That's a humility action. That's a humility choice. It's a gratitude choice because God's up before I am. Sometimes I get up 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I go out and ask God for help, and he's already waiting on me. That's good. It's good for God to be waiting on me. I need to spend more time waiting on God. But we get to the bottom of page 88. We pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. We pause and ask God before we act. Boy, that's hard to learn. Oh my goodness. Took 11 steps to get there. What happens? When we talk about the 4 choices in the final session of the series, which would be a week from Monday, we're going to actually take an interesting to me, it may not be interesting to anybody else, and this is a reveal for the Threads of Recovery people, so don't tell anybody. We're going to look at the chapter to wives and look at the humility thread. We're not even going to try to look at the other 3. They're all there. All 4 choices are in each chapter, but we're going to look at the chapter to wives and see the humility choices. We're going to look at the family afterward and see the gratitude choices in that chapter. I'm not making this up. The choices are baked into those chapters. We're going to look at the chapter to employers, and believe it or not, we're going to find forgiveness. That was a surprise, but it's there. And then a vision for you, of course, it's the responsibility chapter, not just to carry the message, but to practice these principles in all our affairs. And I close with 2 reminders, folks. Thank you for letting me do this. Our real purpose, which is both a reason and a consequence for these 4 choices. Our real purpose is to, top page 77, top 4 or 5 lines of page 77 in the big book. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. And that takes humility, gratitude, forgiveness, and responsibility to live up to that. And then, of course, our code. Near the bottom of page 84, in the middle of the step 10 discussion, our code, love and tolerance of others, is our code. I can't do that without some humility. I can't do that without a lot of gratitude. It is forgiveness, and it's my responsibility to try to let God help me live that way. Thank you very much.